Hello guys, I am Vitold and this is one of BMW's newest creations and one that actually may make a lot of sense in some cases. So let's dive in deeper into what this F900XR motorcycle really is. And it may be slightly confusing for three reasons. First of all, because it looks similarly to the bigger S1000XR crazy adventure motorcycle with insane power and overall performance. Second of all, because it's got 900 in its name, which is not common in BMW's lineup and may make people actually wonder what its engine really is. And thirdly, because there's actually almost the same engine as in BMW F900XR. So this motorcycle looks more exciting than it may really be. Now let's start with why it looks like S1000XR. It does, as despite this very small difference in engine displacement between the two, barely 100 cubic centimeters, so around 10%, both may somehow appeal to the same target group of riders. Both are supposed to be more comfortable kind of sports bikes that provide a more upright position. Both can have side panniers mounted if you would like them to go for a longer trip, and both have somehow better than regular wind protection. So if there are so many similarities, then why to make two separate models? And here is where it gets more interesting. The difference in power and performance is absolutely huge. S1000XR is basically a sports bike's engine-powered motorcycle, which has this engine put into this nice and more comfortable chassis, and specifically its S1000R engine, that in turn got its engine from S1000RR. Just had it slightly detuned and remapped so that it gives more torque and lower RPM and doesn't rev that high. It's basically more rider friendly and not so much crazy because of that. And that's great. Still, it's got 165 horsepower and 114 newton-meters of torque out of a 4-cylinder engine, and at high revs, it is a monster that delivers a huge grin on any rider's face. Now, F900XR is having a very similar 2-cylinder engine to a completely different motorcycle, F850GS. So kind of the heritage comes from a little bit of a different type of motorcycle, because that's a typically adventure/enduro motorcycle. It's also not the biggest GS in the family, because that would be the R1250GS, but it's the middle child. So the F900XR has a 895 cubic centimeters of engine displacement and 105 horsepower, and also 92 newton meters of torque, which is further from the big XR than some of us might actually expect. Well guys, it's no rocket. Just like the middle GS with slightly less engine displacement at 853 cubic centimeters of this displacement, it's also got 95 horsepower and also actually identically 92 newton meters of torque. I wouldn't notice that 10 horsepower difference between the two really. So S1000XR ticks all the boxes if you want a slightly more comfortable sports bike that you can travel a lot on and also ride in the city, as it's very civilized with all the tech, wind protection, comfort levels, and it's also crazy quick and fun on a racetrack or twisty mountain road. Now, F900XR is the same, except for the fun and performance part. It's no speed demon and it won't make you hold the handlebar harder when accelerating. This is the main difference between the two. The second difference, now not in terms of purpose of their existence, but in terms of behavior, is that the smaller XR, the F900XR, feels much lighter no matter what you do with it. It's also less stable because of that. It's much easier to handle at lower speeds, and it gives a very light feeling, while the big S1000XR is far, in my opinion, from feeling that light. So all right, that's the first thing. Now the 900cc part is purely due to engine's displacement, and I find it strange that just for this model and F900R, single R, so the naked bike, BMW decided to modify the engine that is already there in the F850GS. But they did and made them more powerful, which is kind of cool. And this doesn't seem to have changed that much, but I'm certain that we would find some differences if we did proper scientific testing. In real life, I believe that the level of performance is very similar to F850GS. Let's then say that it's got its own engine, and this is kind of cool. So how would I perceive its performances? I believe this may interest many of you who already know what F900XR is and for and who it is for. So I would put it this way. There isn't much fire in it, and what I mean by that is that this is an engine that lets you comfortably commute solo. You will be quicker than most cars, but some would be able to kick this bike's ass in a straight line race. If you want it to be quick, you've got to rev it really high and be prepared to change gears very quickly, as they're rather short. So it's not going to be for those that like to feel the adrenaline when accelerating. It's fine and smooth and quiet. There's really no worrying vibration and doesn't get too hot. So it's absolutely proper. 105 horsepower is not little, but it's not much either. But where this motorcycle scores is the feeling of being so light. So let's put this in a chassis and handling category. And man, just after having spent some time with this F900XR, I moved straight to S1000XR of the second generation, and this thing felt like a stone on wheels just because of the comparison. It's not a bad bike to ride. It's not actually heavy on its own. It's also generally not the easiest motorcycle to handle, but it's fine comparing to others in the category. Now, compared to F900XR, it's just not fun to get it moving in terms of handling and ease of maneuvering, especially at low speed, mostly at low speeds. F900XR feels bloody so incredibly light that at some points I actually, and I'm serious here, I wished that it actually felt a bit heavier. It feels so light at low speeds that riding over some little bumps, it gives a feeling of getting unstable actually. And large bumps are bad. And there is actually no such feeling when riding F850GS. So it's going to be awesome on a super smooth surface, but once it gets just a tiny bit rough, you will in fact end up holding the handlebar really hard at those points. Not when accelerating, but when riding over bumps. And I didn't like that because it wouldn't inspire much confidence and would actually discourage me from riding faster. It's okay at speeds, but still the feeling of being so bouncy was not so cool to me. And still, because of the fact that it stayed mostly in my head, I wasn't really willing to feel the traffic, as riding over anything would put the bike out of balance. And this is not what you want to happen when you are between other vehicles. So if you are planning on riding in the cities with perfectly smooth roads and at low speeds, it'll be fun and very enjoyable. If you will be riding purely on long distances outside of the city on very smooth surfaces, it will be fine too, as you won't experience that much of this bouncing at low speeds. But if you are going to do both, so riding in the city and outside the city, then this is when I would say no thank you, especially if the surfaces of the tarmac in that city or outside the city you wouldn't be sure that they would be absolutely perfect. If you like the engine and the whole idea of this kind of light bike, and also riding outside of the city, get BMW F850GS. Now, if you like riding in the city, well, also you may get F850GS. If you want performance, get S1000XR. And by the way, F900XR weighs 219 kilograms with fuel, while S1000XR, which is visibly bigger, has 2 more cylinders and much more power, weighs just 7 kilograms more. Actually, they feel like 70 more, but in fact the difference is very little. Let me add one more clarification here. It is possible to make a motorcycle feel super light and at the same time make it feel or just make it super stable. And I'll tell you more. BMW has such a motorcycle and it's called R1250GS. So the biggest GS. It feels super light, even though it's not. It's heavier than both of these, but you only feel that it's not light when you are either pushing it or trying to lift it after a fall. So it doesn't actually count. It's super easy to handle, just like F900XR, but at the same time, it's not bouncy at all. And it's very stable, like S1000XR at high speeds. And the reason why I'm making so many comparisons here for you guys is that if you are willing to purchase a new bike, you will have likely a chance to ride most of them at a random BMW dealership. And having those descriptions in mind, I think and I hope this will help you realize certain behaviors so much better, and in the end understand what's up with certain motorcycles. So what's good in this, what's the benchmark here, what's the benchmark here, and what's the benchmark here. So yeah, F900XR will not score great in handling if you are going to be willing to do it all kind of thing on it. But in some narrow areas like riding on super great roads, it will be really fine and really fun because of that light feeling. It's super easy to make it lean and turn. It does stay neutral in corners, but again, as long as you don't ride over any bumps, because then it quickly gets out of balance, loses its precision, and it kind of needs to be corrected. So doing the corrections is easy, but doing it all the time is not something for me actually myself. Now F850GS does that perfectly. So it's weird that this one doesn't. Now as for comfort levels purely, it's generally fine, but this feeling of bounciness again, and jumping, and lack of stability because of that is a big takeaway for me personally. And note that you also won't really be able to go off the road with it. It may be put into an adventure motorcycles category by BMW, but it's 100% street adventure category, just like the bigger S1000XR. There's a 15.5-liter fuel tank, and it isn't super impressive in the smaller XR. But let's not exaggerate, especially that F850GS has half a liter less, and nobody's actually complaining as far as I'm concerned. However, if F900XR had those 4.5 liters more, so 20, and at the same time as much as S1000XR, it would weigh 223 kilograms, and that's just 3 kilograms less than S1000XR, which would look even more funny. Now the position is comfortable for a guy like me at 183 centimeters tall, the seat was fine, and the handlebar was okay, not too wide and not too narrow, just really good. Weight protection was proper too, or should I rather say wind modulation, because that little windscreen isn't really protecting you that much, but at least there is no turbulences somewhere around the chest or around the helmet, so it's all good. This is not a bike to ride 1,000 kilometers at once, in my opinion, so I think that's fine, taking that into account. And one very clear characteristic is that sitting on this bike, and it's 82.5 centimeters of seat height, you feel very much that you are sitting on a motorcycle rather than somehow in a motorcycle, if that makes any sense. Obviously, we always sit on motorcycles, but some bikes give you the feeling of being a part of themselves. And S1000XR is such a motorcycle, for example. R1250GS is such a motorcycle too. But F900XR is more like riding a medium-sized dog that wants you to fall off of it. And acting in a bouncy way doesn't help that much. And I had this thought very early on, and some may like it, some may not. I prefer to feel like a part of a motorcycle, and I wonder what you guys actually think. It's a little bit like in cars, but please let me know how you prefer this aspect to be. And as for the seat itself, BMW was super generous with the choice of seats here. And my understanding is that there is no adjustment in the bike, but there are a few different seats to choose from initially when ordering a bike. And they vary from really low at 79.5 centimeters up to super high for a lady in high heels at 87 centimeters. And that's actually as high as R1250GS's seat in its tallest setting, which is crazy. Now, brakes are fine here, and there's nothing more to say here, I think, actually. And I didn't expect anything less from BMW. They don't feel as awesome as in boxer-powered motorcycles with telelever front suspension that keeps those bikes super flat when braking, but that's unique to those. All is fine here in F900XR, so right now I've got a few complaints. First, a lack of stability when riding over rough surfaces, and the second, even with initially mounted aftermarket exhaust, the bike is still extremely quiet. And in fact, I've got to tell you that in the beginning I didn't even realize that it had an upgraded exhaust, or kind of an upgraded exhaust. This has never happened to me before. An aftermarket exhaust, usually whatever brand it is, always gives some of that deep tone, but not here. So don't waste your money on this, and please get something else to make this bike sound alright. And it should sound really nice with a proper exhaust. Now, mediocre performance is not a disadvantage, it's just the way this bike is. It is supposed to be something else than S1000XR, the bigger brother. But now, hey, the way it looks, I think happens to be quite interesting, and in the pictures it looks like a baby S1000XR, but in reality and now in the videos I hope it does look to you pretty mature and even quite sexy, and that's how it looks in fact. And I think it's a good looking bike. I do prefer S1000XR, which I believe is one of the best looking motorcycles with so much muscle and smooth lines at the same time. F900XR is kind of similar, just lacks some of that muscle and has that less serious smiling face. How could you say no to that sweet smile? But seriously, there is nothing weird or wrong with it. So good job by BMW. And there's plenty of options for F900XR, and they include dynamic ESA suspension, so adjustable in fact suspension that I cannot figure out in any BMW in terms of how much the modes really differ between each other. I never can notice a clear difference, so I feel it may be kind of a waste of money. And there of course is ABS, actually cornering ABS, so it works in curves too, and traction control also coming as a standard, and so does this standard for BMW bikes display that gives you all the necessary information, and its default speedo and rev counter are super not sexy. There's also an LED front light and adjustable windscreen in 2 positions. And you may get yourself handbars, which I think I would add myself. And now, weirdly enough, heated grips are not a standard on, at least on my local market here, which I think is lame. I think it sucks. And having to pay 200 euros or dollars pretty much for this option is a bit of a shame. Now the same issue is there with cruise control and the quick shifter, which would, after you pay for those and the quick shifter, it would allow you to change gears just moving the lever without the need of pulling the clutch in most situations. If you want, you may also get a center stand, adaptive front light called Pro in this case, which means that it puts more light into corners. And this is actually great if you're going to ride after dark. And there can be keyless access, which I actually love in BMW, and I would get it on any motorcycle, and I think pay pretty much as they would ask for it. And I do highly recommend having this keyless access because it's super comfortable, since it lets you start the bike and also to switch it off without inserting the key anywhere. It's just enough if you keep it in your pocket and you are good to go. So in the end, what score does this bike deserve to get is the question. And let me also mention that the quality is typical for BMW here, and it's great literally everywhere. It is super enjoyable, and I love that BMW sticks to that strategy even in smaller motorcycles like this one. And note that I said smaller and not necessarily cheaper. And this is because adding some reasonable options to it, it starts costing over 13,000 euros. And I would say that on the one hand, it's a lot, but actually on the other, considering its quality and even the pure availability of those options, so the fact that we can have them, it seems not super expensive, I think. It's just thinking that for like 5,000 euros more, we can have S1000XR with that crazy performance and some extras added already, because apparently they both lack some of those basic things. Then I would really focus, I think, on how to get that S1000XR. And having all this in mind, I feel like I should not maybe even give it a 7. So I'm going to make an exception here and make it a 6.5 out of 10. It's not impressive, but it's fine, and on smooth roads it just can be fun. Just I don't think that this excitement would last that long for this kind of a sporty looking motorcycle. So please let me know what you guys think about that light feeling slash bouncy suspension. Actually, why would BMW go for this kind of characteristics of suspension? And that's it from me. See you in the next video. And in the comments below, I'm curious what you guys think about this one. See you!